Coming up next, 1980 was a wild year for rock and roll. It's so hard to believe it was 46 years ago. At that point, the charts were dominated by soft rock, holdovers, and the last gasp of disco. Meanwhile, some of history's most groundbreaking tracks were flying under the radar. Songs that became legit anthems for generations to come, but they couldn't even crack the top 40 back then. Today, though, we're counting down 10 badass tracks from 1980 that were ignored by radio but are now total classics, including a song that an iconic frontman wrote that fans and his own band didn't realize was a suicide note until it was too late. Plus a song that was written during a screaming rehearsal argument. The lead singer, who couldn't play any instruments, got so angry he ripped the guitar off his guitarist's neck and started making a sound like a dentist drill with it. It became one of their most iconic tracks. What about the lovestruck guitarist who got his punk rock girlfriend a record deal only to be brutally dissed by her in a public interview? He turned that diss into a 6-minute sonic masterpiece. We've got some great ones. Let's do it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest songs and the greatest artists of all time. If you ever got a haircut from a Flowbee, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the white button, and click the notification bell so you know when our stuff comes out. Today, we've got a non-hit countdown. I'm telling you, you're going to be shocked of the classics from the 80s that weren't actually hits. But all these years later, they get the last laugh. All right, coming in at number 10, we're going to solve a song mystery. I've got Van Halen with And the Cradle Will Rock. So as the 80s kicked off, Van Halen's momentum was absolutely unstoppable. Right after wrapping up the Van Halen 2 tour, they headed straight back to Sunset Sound to record their follow-up, pausing only to renegotiate their contract since, their success had seriously boosted their bargaining power at this point. Sticking with what worked, the band tore through recording. They knocked out all the instrumental tracks in 4 days, and they wrapped up the entire album in 2 weeks. While David Lee Roth and producer Ted Templeman loved including cover songs on albums, as we know, Eddie was reluctant to lean on other people's material. He was adamant that this next album should be all originals. So Women and Children First became their first Van Halen LP to do just that, mixing fresh material with reworked tracks from their earliest demos. And The Cradle Will Rock opens the album with what sounds like Eddie's signature guitar tone, at least at first listen. But it's actually something else that's been really an unsolved mystery that's perplexed music aficionados for decades. They've been trying to figure out what exactly it is. Well, I asked original bassist Michael Anthony about it. Here's what he told me.
I don't think anybody really knew that was keyboards when that first came out. They thought he was doing it on guitar. Ed he went to the store and bought a Wurlitzer little electric piano. Very, very basic. Hey, let's see what this sounds like blowing through my Marshall stack. And we're like, oh my God, he came up with this thing. We're like, holy crap. All that is, because I played it live on stage when we did that. He had a pedal effect, and he was just banging his hand on the keyboard, not even really playing any kind of note. So it was just an effect, and he just banged it, and then turned it off.
So the song tells the story of a rebellious kid who upsets his parents and the town elders with his love for rock and roll. The title plays off the nursery rhyme Rockabye Baby, of course. Dave's lyrics follow this youngster's downward spiral, starting with staying up late and ending up homeless and unemployed. But while the verses show sympathy for worried parents, the chorus, it embraces the chaos. The cradle will rock, and I say rock on. Released as the album's only single, and The Cradle Will Rock, it didn't hit the top 40. It peaked at number 54, partly because of that unconventional sound. It rubs some rock purists the wrong way, is what a lot of people say. All right, in at number 9, we have a song that you're going to be shocked was not a hit because it's so catchy and it's so well known. It's like one of those power pop classics. I got the Romantics with What I Like About You. Formed on Valentine's Day in 1977 in Detroit, the original lineup consisted of vocalist and guitarist Wally Palmer, drummer Jimmy Marinos, by guitarist Mike Skill and bassist Rich Cole. What I Like About You is truly one of the definitive power pop songs of the 80s, but it was never a hit when it got released. When it dropped in 1980 on their debut album, it barely made a dent. It peaked at number 49. Here's the thing. The song got almost no promotion from the label, and radio stations, they just weren't adding it to their playlists. The Romantics' actual top 40 hit, it would come a few years later with Talking in Your Sleep. That one hit number 3, and then One in a Million reached number 37. What I Like About You went through some serious changes before becoming the version that we all know and love, though. Early footage shows the band playing it in a small Detroit club right after they had written it. And the song, it was totally different. The lead vocal was phrased differently, and there was actually a bass solo before the harmonica section. But when they hit the studio to record their first album, producer Pete Soley, he streamlined everything. He suggested cutting the bass solo and just going for a more direct approach to make it in your face. He said, let's hit it hard. Let's do a hey and go right into the harp solo. They also added hand claps, and anytime you put hand claps in a song, it's going to be better. And they made other tweaks that shaped it into the iconic track that we know today. So you might be wondering, how did What I Like About You gain steam after it was never a hit on radio? Well, it actually stalled out, when it was released as a single, had to wait a few years, but the song actually found new life at the end of the 80s when it appeared in a Budweiser beer ad campaign. That's when it became a hit. It had to wait almost 10 years. Never let you down. Finally became the anthem it was always meant to be after that. Here's what the band told me about it.
They had a bass solo. We had been jamming with, we played with Sonic Rendezvous Band. We had seen Sonic Rendezvous, and he always had that bass coming in the middle.
So by the time we went into the studio to record the first album, the producer, Pete Soley, he came in and we worked on all the songs on the album, plus some. And he kind of streamlined. He said, we don't really need the bass solo at that point. Let's just hit it hard. Let's do a hey and then go right to the harp solo. And that and little other things, hand claps here and there. And
so after the band had rocked MTV with Talking in Your Sleep, actually a brutal lawsuit kept them from putting out music for years. What could have been? Man, this band could have been big. That's what I like about you. That's what I like about you. All right, heading into the number 8 spot, I got Talking Heads with another iconic song that was shockingly never a hit. Once in a Lifetime. Once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask... Comes from the Heads' 4th album, Remain in Light, which is actually the 3rd produced by Brian Eno, whose experimental style was a perfect match for this band. But unlike their previous records, these songs were mostly written in the studio at Compass Point in the Bahamas, with all 4 members getting credit. Actually, Eno got a credit as well. Once in a Lifetime's iconic bass line, that came first. Tina Weymouth recalled Chris Franz yelling at her from the corner, ba-dom, dom, dom, bump, bump, bump. He told her, play this. She picked up her bass and started playing it exactly as Chris shouted it. And he said, that's more like it. But the lyrics came from a completely different place. According to Franz, David Byrne rented a car and drove around the American South listening to Pentecostal preachers on the radio. David Byrne confirmed this, saying, so much of it was taken from the style of radio evangelists. I would improvise lines as if I was giving a sermon in that kind of meter, in that kind of hyperventilating style, and they'll go back and I would distill that. Allegedly, he also listened to famous evangelists like Jimmy Swaggart and parodied that style.
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
Brian Eno, he produced the track and wrote the chorus, which he also sang on. A lot of people don't know that. Byrne wrote the verses, delivering them in that intriguing talk singing style that we love. The song explores the feeling of living on autopilot. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, right?
And you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile.
Byrne preaches on, and the chorus, how did I get here? Byrne would later say, we're largely unconscious. We operate half awake or on autopilot and end up with a house and a family and a job and everything else, and we haven't really stopped to ask ourselves, how did I get here? What is the meaning of life? And of course, with one of the most iconic music videos ever behind it, featuring David Byrne's wild choreography, which was actually created by Tony Basil of Mickey fame. To get just the right feel, they researched people in trances at UCLA and USC watching documentaries about religious experiences and snake handlers. Once in a Lifetime was released as a single in January of '81. It never even broke into the Hot 100. It actually peaked in the bubbling under chart at 103. Crazy. At number 7, I've got an all-time rock anthem that came from a singer who only had a few guitar lessons. Talking about Bono and the Boys with I Will Follow. U2 recorded their debut album Boy in Dublin in 1980 at Windmill Lane Studios. Originally, they planned to work with producer Martin Hannett, but after Joy Division's Ian Curtis tragically took his own life, Martin wasn't available. He couldn't continue. So U2 teamed up with a young producer by the name of Steve Lillywhite. According to Bono, I Will Follow, that came out of a screaming argument in the rehearsal room. It was literally coming out of a kind of rage, he would say. Bono recalled trying to explain a sound that he heard in his head for the song to the other band members. It was something like an electric drill onto your brain. Said Bono, and I quote, "One thing is for sure, as a musician, my grasp is a lot further than my reach. I can hear the music in my head, but I'm not able to play it. I'm like someone who can't paint, can't even sketch, trying to use the hands of another artist. A lot of my rage is my inability to express myself, which is true of a lot of people. I've only had a few guitar lessons, and so I'm very dependent on these three comrades." Frustrated that Edge wasn't getting it, Bono grabbed Edge's Gibson Explorer right off his neck and started making this wild, dangerous squeal with the guitar. "Go on," said Edge. "Keep it coming. You're nearly there." Surprised, Bono asked, "You actually like this?" And the Edge said, "I'm not sure I like it, but it does sound like a dentist drill. Let me see if I can take it somewhere." That was the big band explained that thematically the song is about unconditional love and the kind a mother has for her child. If you walk away, I will follow no matter what you do. You cannot separate yourself from that love. But there's something darker underneath, said Bono about it. If you step out of that for a second and think it's a song about my own mother, it becomes a bit of a suicide note. If you leave me, I'm coming after you. This is mind-blowing to me looking back on that. What drugs were we on? None. It's funny. Dropped in late 1980 and in early 1981, it became the album's enduring hit, I Will Follow. But criminally, it topped out at number 81 on the Hot 100, and it took a few years for that to happen, 1984. All right, coming into number 6 is a song that came from a real heartbreak. Talking about The Boss with The River.
We go down to the river.
So Bruce Springsteen's 5th studio album, The River, hit shelves in late 1980, and man, this thing was massive. Talking a double LP pack with Bruce at his best. A lot of fans see The River as the final chapter in a 3-album trilogy that kicked off with Born to Run in 1975, then rolled through Darkness on the Edge of Town in 1978, and The River, of course, following. Each one following Bruce's mythical characters through defining moments in their lives. Now, originally, this was supposed to be a single album called The Ties That Bind. It was slated for late 1979. But then Bruce wrote the title track and everything changed. He decided to fold in darker folk-influenced material, expanding the whole project into something a lot more ambitious. Recording stretched across 18 months with John Landau and Steven Van Zandt co-producing alongside Springsteen. They were going for this big cinematic live sound that just jumps out of the speakers, as Bruce's music wanted to do. The River became Springsteen's first #1 album, and it gave him his first top 10 hit with Hungry Heart. It launched a massive tour through 1980 and 1981, and Bruce called it a gateway to his future work with albums like Nebraska and Tunnel of Love, picking up threads that started in this album.
Everybody's got a hungry heart.
Now, regarding the title track, The River, Springsteen wrote in a set of liner notes from a later compilation album, he said, "A breakthrough song for me. It was in the detail. One of the first of my story songs that eventually led to Nebraska. The River was based on conversations with his brother-in-law. He'd lost his construction job, but kept grinding to support his family. And of course, the shotgun wedding, that was Bruce's sister's story."
Birthday, I got a union card and a wedding coat.
beautiful song. She was still a teenager when she got married, and she knew the song was about her the first time that she heard it. Bruce debuted The River at the No Nukes concerts at Madison Square Garden on September 21st, 1979, where he shared the bill with James Taylor and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. While the song was a massive success in Europe, Columbia Records chose not to release The River as a single in the States to avoid competing with Hungry Heart. It's kind of weird. The track was seen as a more somber, slow-burning ballad with a runtime that exceeded the standard radio edit of that era, making it a hard fit for top 40 stations, and that's why they didn't release it. Still, it's become a legendary piece of storytelling on FM radio rock. All right, halfway through the countdown at number 5, we've got a true master, a true genius, Peter Gabriel with Games Without Frontiers.
In games without frontiers, war without tears.
You know, Peter Gabriel recorded his third self-titled album between his home studio at Ashcombe House near Bath and London's Townhouse Studios with producer Steve Lillywhite. The album marked a huge shift in Peter's writing approach, though. Rhythm came first, melody came second, and everything else built on top of those rhythmic foundations. Said Gabriel about it, "I think that the third album was quite important for me in terms of really having a defining sound and the band coming through on that record. It was the first record where I was clearly doing something different from what other people were doing." The album would feature contributions from Kate Bush, Paul Weller, Phil Collins, and David Rhodes, and it delivered Peter's first UK Top 10 solo hit with Games Without Frontiers. Now, Peter got the idea for the title from a 1970s European game show called Zoo Sans Frontières. This is where contestants dressed up in ridiculous costumes to compete for prizes.
Bonsoir. Nous voici parvenus au terme de ce tournoi Jeux sans frontières 77.
In England, they called it It's a Knockout, giving him that lyric. Gabriel thought that the show's symbolism was perfect for exploring how all this silliness masked deeper tensions within us. Old rivalries were never far from the surface, and he wanted to show that war was still the silliest game of all. Now, the French phrase that's repeated throughout the song, you know, it means Games Without Frontiers, and it's actually Kate Bush singing that, or should I say whisper singing it. Kate was actually a last-minute addition. According to co-producer Steve Lillywhite, we had someone else singing that part, and we realized the accent, it wasn't so great. So Peter decided to ask Kate down because it was a mess. It was easy, it was great fun, no more than half an hour. Although Games Without Frontiers became Peter's first UK Top 10 as a solo artist, in the United States, it topped out at number 48 on the Billboard Hot 100. It's actually 20 spots up from his previous charting single, Salisbury Hill.
Climbing up on Salisbury Hill.
Still a far cry from the singles from his commercial juggernaut, So today, we're going to give it the love it deserves. And I actually love how they've used it in cinema and on TV, especially in the Americans. Just brilliant how they've done that.
We will in games without frontiers, war without tears.
Coming in at number 4, I've got Joy Division with what I think is the most haunting song of the rock era, period. Love Will Tear Us Apart. So frontman Ian Curtis married Deborah Woodruff back in August of 1975. But by late 1979, their relationship was falling apart. Now, around this time, Ian started an affair with Belgian journalist Annie Connor, and it was tearing him up inside. And that's where he wrote Love Will Tear Us Apart, which would turn out to really be a suicide note in many ways. First recorded in late November 1979, to some, this post-punk masterpiece sounds like an upbeat pop single on the surface. A lot of people have told me that. I don't hear it, but underneath, it's unbearably dark. You just got to listen to the lyrics. I've always felt that darkness when hearing it, which is always confusing when people think it's catchy or upbeat. I mean, does anybody listen to lyrics anymore? The lyrics are absolutely chilling. I mean, Ian was channeling all the chaos of his crumbling marriage and his life into these lyrics. When routine bites hard and ambitions are low, and resentment rides high but emotions won't grow, and we're changing our ways, taking different roads. I mean, it's insane. Crazy thing is, Even his bandmates didn't catch on. Said Bernard Sumner, "We didn't really listen to the lyrics. Joy Division was 4 people on pedestals, and we didn't communicate with each other about what the songs were about." But bassist Peter Hook had quite a reaction when I asked him about it. This is what he told me.
People interestingly think it's a love song, but it isn't. It's a hate song. You know, if you listen to the lyrics, it's a very dark message to a lover. I mean, as I said in my Joy Division book, I wouldn't have liked that song to have been written about me. That sends shivers down your spine, but it's masqueraded as an upbeat pop tune.
Wow. When I was in the room with Peter Hook, I felt that chill. Very chilling. That about sums it up. And by spring 1980, when Joy Division finalized the arrangement, Ian was living with Anique and divorce from Deborah was imminent. The band was gearing up for their first American tour and everyone was pumped. They felt that they could take on America and really succeed there. But on May 17, 1980, Ian returned to his marital home and asked Deborah to reconsider the divorce. She refused and spent the night at her parents' house. Alone that night, Ian played Iggy Pop's The Idiot on repeat and wrote Deborah a letter. Calling Sister Midnight. In the early hours of Sunday, May 18th, while birds were singing outside, Ian Curtis hung himself. He was only 23 years old. Originally released in April of 1980, Love Will Tear Us Apart was re-released in June after Ian's death and became Joy Division's first and only UK hit. It reached number 13. Here in the US, it was a total no-show on the Billboard Hot 100. However, it did make an appearance on the US Disco Top 100, coming in at like number 42. Coming in at the number 3 spot, I've got a great one. Dire Straits with Romeo and Juliet. Dire Straits dropped their 3rd studio album, Making Movies, on October 17, 1980, and critics ate it up. It's only 7 tracks, and it clocks in at under 38 minutes, but this record is packed with Dire Straits' brilliance. You know, classics like Skate Away, Tunnel of Love. We talked about those a few weeks, but the true classic from the set is definitely Romeo and Juliet. The song's origins, they're tied to an ill-fated relationship between Mark Knopfler and his punk rock girlfriend, Holly Beth Vincent. Holly Beth Vincent, Knopfler was trying to help her and her band, the Italians, get their big break. He played their demo for his manager, Ed Bicknell. The next thing Holly knew, she and her drummer, Steve Young, were packing their bags for England with the promise of signing a record deal there. It wasn't her only offer at the time, though, but she pursued it because of her relationship with Mark. But instead of getting her a deal, Holly said that Ed, he brought us to England and left us there. But not all was lost. While in the UK, Knopfler introduced Holly to BBC DJ and Oval Records owner Charlie Gillette. He put the band under contract for a single, and they recorded Tell That Girl to Shut Up for Oval. The single became a minor hit. It climbed the British charts, and it made enough noise that Holly and the Italians soon after signed a deal with Virgin Records. So sometime during the rise of Holly's band, she and Mark had a falling out. It was bad. Allegedly, after she had gotten what she wanted from him in the music industry, a record deal. The details about their romance, there's not a lot out there, but we do know that Romeo and Juliet came out of it, which is probably enough to tell us how it all went down. In fact, after all that Mark did for her, she ripped his heart out by acting as if their relationship had meant nothing. Actually, Mark covered it in the 2nd verse of the song perfectly. It's where Romeo laments Juliet's fall from grace, falling for chains of silver and gold. She's imprisoned herself to the promises of pretty strangers and cast aside the prize of their relationship. Just poetry. Now, the song Romeo, of course, representing Mark, reminds Juliet representing Holly. Romeo reminds her that she's promised him everything. She promised him thick and thin. And the wording, reminiscent of a marriage vow, implies that no matter what happens, that they'd be there for each other. Almost certainly, it also implies that he promised her this. So now here he is keeping his promise, trying to win her back. But her callous response is, "Oh, Romeo? Yeah, I used to have a scene with him." Absolutely brutal. Did their promises mean nothing to Juliet? And Knopfler actually lifted this line from an interview that Holly gave after she broke up with him. When asked about her relationship with Knopfler, she said, "What happened was that I had a scene with Mark Knopfler and it got to the point where he couldn't handle it and we split up." He turned that brutal diss into an all-time classic. When bassist John Illsley first heard Mark Knopfler play Romeo and Juliet for him, he thought, man, if the rest of the album sounds like this, we got something incredible on our hands. When Mark started playing those opening chords, John was floored. Ed Bicknell, he had the same reaction when he first heard Romeo and Juliet. He said, I remember Mark coming into the office and playing it to me for the first time. I didn't know what to say. I just sat and stared at the ground in complete disbelief. John had watched Mark struggle through a brutal breakup with Holly. He never expected anything like this to come from it. Actually, he was stunned that Knopfler could create something so beautiful while feeling so devastated, so blue. But then it hit him. It was only because Mark's heart was shattered that his masterpiece was even possible. It is a masterpiece. Sadly, it was not immediately recognized for its brilliance here in the US, though. It was released as a single. It went to number 8 in the UK, but it was completely ignored in America, failing to break into the Hot 100. But it has since become a total classic. Coming in at number 2, I've got the Thunder from Down Under, AC/DC with Shoot the Thrill. Now, we've talked about Back in Black, 100 times or more on this channel, but this rock standard was released in July of 1980. The album served as both a heartfelt tribute to late frontman Bon Scott and a triumphant rebirth for AC/DC, that much we know. With new vocalist Brian Johnson stepping in just months after Scott's tragic passing. Of course, the band teamed up with producer Mutt Lange again to create a bone-dry, incredibly punchy sound that set the gold standard for hard rock production thereafter. From the ominous opening toll of Hell's Bells to the swaggering riffs that You Shook Me All Night Long. Of course, the title track, Back in Black, is famously all killer, no filler. The album stripped away the excess of the late 70s and delivered high voltage energy. The album saved the band's career and became one of the best-selling LPs in history, actually the biggest-selling rock album ever. AC/DC released 4 singles from the album: You Shook Me All Night Long, Hell's Bells, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, and Back in Black. Two cracked the top 40. You Shook Me, that hit number 37, and Back in Black reached number 35. But Shoot the Thrill was never released as a single here, which meant the song lived exclusively on album-oriented rock radio. Brian Johnson said it was one of the toughest tracks for him to sing. There's just no recovery time between the verses at all. He said you need a third lung, which he pretty much had to be able to do it. I think that's why the rumor went around that Brian actually did have a third lung. Actually, that was a rumor back in the 80s. Despite never being a single, Shoot the Thrill quickly became an AC/DC favorite and a staple at their live shows. Notably, it also got headline status in 2010's Iron Man 2, when Tony Stark makes a grand entrance. That might be its biggest claim to fame. Scenes from the film were combined with AC/DC concert footage to make a video for the song that was released before the movie hit theaters, serving as a preview that knocked our socks off. The Iron Man 2 soundtrack was comprised entirely of AC/DC songs, with Shoot the Thrill and Highway to Hell both appearing in the movie.
And Mr. Tony Stark, who is, of course, a national treasure.
The song also plays in the 2012 movie The Avengers when Iron Man appears. So becoming Iron Man's theme song, it's not bad at all. And of course, it's one of many AC/DC songs that were never hits. It's close to 1 billion streams. So for this countdown, I've got one honorable mention. Genesis with Turn It On Again. The 3 Genesis members, Tony Banks, Phil Collins, and Mike Rutherford at this point, all wrote the music together, with Rutherford handling the lyrics. Turn It On Again's album, Duke, that was the first where they composed songs as a group, jamming out arrangements before one member tackled the words. This marked a major shift for Genesis from theatrical prog rock to radio-friendly pop. And of course, some longtime fans felt betrayed, but the ultimate commercial payoff was massive for them. Turn It On Again opens with All I Need Is a TV Show, of course, exploring how we build imaginary relationships with TV characters while neglecting real friends and family. And while it became a top 10 smash in the UK, the song only reached number 58 in the US, mainly because its complex 13/4 and 9/4 time signatures made it tough for casual listeners to follow. Gotta love Genesis. All right, here we are. Number 1, it was an easy one. I've got the Mighty Rush and their introduction to the 80s, The Spirit of Radio. Rush dropped their 7th studio album, Permanent Waves, on January 14, 1980. They recorded it at the studio in Marin Heights, Quebec, and mixed it at Trident Studios in London. The whole thing came together in about 4 weeks. Only Rush. This album marked a major shift for the band, though. They were moving away from those long conceptual epics and into something a lot more radio-friendly. Originally, they wanted to call the record Wavelength, but that title had been used a lot of times, so they went with Permanent Waves. And it was actually a jab at the music industry, constantly announcing, new waves in music. New wave. Spirit of Radio was, of course, one of the most commercial songs that Rush ever produced up to that point, blending multiple musical styles, even throwing in a touch of reggae. And at the time, Alex would recall, and I quote, "We've always played around with reggae in the studio, and we used to do a reggae intro to Working Man on stage. So when it came time to doing Spirit of Radio, we just thought we'd do the reggae bit to make us smile, just have a little bit of fun." The song itself was said to be inspired by Toronto's radio station CFNY, whose slogan was The Spirit of Radio. Neil Peart explained, though, it wasn't really about a radio station. It was about musical integrity and celebrating stations that played everything from reggae to jazz to new wave. Said Getty, and I quote, "I don't know whether it was just a relief for people not to have to sit through 25 minutes to get to the end of a song, but we just took all of our ability and all that experimenting we'd done and focused it in on a smaller time period. And the songs really had a lot of power." Getty, let's be honest, we'll gladly take anything that Rush dishes out. 5 minutes or 45 minutes, there's not a wrong answer with Rush. Rush was being pigeonholed as a stale prog rock band, and that jarring reggae breakdown at the end of The Spirit of Radio was a middle finger to expectations. And they intentionally interrupted the song with that Jamaican reggae beat to do that, is a little bit of that. Longtime fans were horrified and actually accused Rush of ripping off the Police and admitted they did it specifically to annoy the people who thought Rush had to stay in just one lane. Sadly, The Spirit of Radio only reached number 51 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was their biggest US hit at the time, though, but not nearly what it deserved. It's since become a rock classic and better than anything that hit number 1 on radio in 1980, let's be clear. So there you have it. The top of 1980, I think these are better than the number 1 hits of 1980, but you tell me, what are your memories? What are your picks? Let's have a great discussion. We invite you to subscribe, be a part of our community. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.